Hey guys, it's Shane, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make minimal house like Traumer. As usual, you get the project file and samples and MIDI and presets and all that kind of stuff for this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available there. And yeah, let's get started. So this loop you heard in the intro, we're at 125 BPM. The first sound we have here is the chord stab, which sounds like this. So, the way this is made is actually pretty simple. You can see it's just an F minor chord. That's the key we're in, is F minor. It's just F minor there, and then an octave down. It's really not that complicated. It's just kind of bouncing between them. And then you can hear it's also like the rhythm. Like I'm constantly doing a new pattern with these. They're always doing different things. And as you can hear, it's adding some variation. And I even have like some notes like on the triplet grid as well. Like I'll show you this part. Like you can see if I turn off the triplet grid, so we have some like that one and that one which fit on to the regular grid. But then if we turn on the triplet grid, you can see, and maybe zoom in a bit, you can see like we have some, some pretty quick little notes there. So, it's just kind of playing around with the two different timings. It's a good way to get kind of a more interesting sound, because it's not going to sound so, like, straight and simple. It's going to feel a little bit more interesting and organic. For the sound on this one, I made it using analog. What this is it is a saw wave. You can see I've got a little bit of a pitch envelope on there just to give it a bit of, more of like a attack. Kind of going into the sound, and then that is going into a low pass filter. And with the low pass, we have 3 modulators. So the first thing we have is the envelope. That's pretty simple. That's what's making it sound kind of plucked. After that, I have the LFO on there. So that's just kind of slowly opening and closing the filter like that. Just kind of bringing it to life, making it a bit more interesting. And then the last thing I have on there is the key tracking. So what key tracking is, I've talked about it a bit before, but basically, think of it like, when you have the pitch on your keyboard. When you play a high note, it plays a high note. When you play a low note, it plays a low note. That is what key tracking is. Basically, whichever parameter you set it to is going to follow where you are on the keyboard. So, with the filter here, what's happening is we have, the higher it is, the more open the filter is. Which is cool because we have the chords jumping between 2 different octaves. So you can hear, this is kind of bringing it to life. If we turn it off, it's just the same thing. But I feel like this makes it feel, like I said, just a little bit more alive, a little bit more interesting. And yeah, and then after that, we just have the amp envelope set like this. You can see there's the LFO that I have on the filter. And the last thing we have inside the synth here is just a bit of vibrato and a bit of unison to kind of give it more character. After that, we have this echo. You can see what I've got going on here is we have this unsynced. It's doing 140 milliseconds. So that's like that fast delay you hear. With this kind of sound, you don't want to go too crazy. It can be very easy to do too much delay or too much reverb or something like that. But just having something small like this, that's adding to like even more of that like sort of weird offbeat rhythm, because it's not synced, definitely works pretty well. So that's the echo. After that, we have this auto filter. With this, you can see it's doing a high pass. And I actually have the LFO on there. So this is kind of a cool technique. You can hear the sound is kind of constantly being like high pass and then brought back down. If I turn this off, it still works, but this just adds a little bit more kind of like interesting modulation to it, It's like something that's changing, and it really brings it to life more. We don't just want our sounds to be like, just in one position with the filter the whole time, not really changing that much. We want like lots of things that are moving and changing and evolving, because that's how you're going to get the most organic, sort of realistic sounding sounds. Or maybe not so much realistic with a sound like this, but like I said, most like human or most organic kind of sounds. After that, we have a bit of saturator and a bit of drum bus, just kind of beefing it up. Here's without those. And then the drum bus. And then the saturators. So you can hear they're just kind of working together, adding a bit more kind of fatness to the sound. Then we just have a compressor side chaining into the kick a little bit, and an EQ8 cutting out the low end, and that is it for the chord stab. The next thing that we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. So you can see it's a pretty simple kick. I just have a few effects on it. It's just like this kind of nice punchy sort of deep kick like this. This is the type of kick you want to use for this kind of minimal house. I have the detune down a little bit if I put this up an octave. So we're in F sharp minor, like I said. As you can see from the, like I was saying, like with the chords and the bass line and stuff. So I have the kick tuned to that. Which even though this is like a little short kick, you still want to tune it. But you can see, if I turn off this detune, it's like a little bit off the note. So that just kind of gets it perfectly down there. And you can see, pitching it up an octave is a good technique to find the tuning of your kicks. For some reason, that'll work better sometimes. But yeah, and then after that, I just have an EQ8 there, just boosting the low end a little bit and giving it a little bit of a cut at 272 hertz for mud. And then the last thing we have on there is just a drum bus to kind of fatten it up. The next thing we have here is the bass, which sounds like this. So this bass is really simple. It's just playing F sharp and then F sharp an octave up. It's kind of like doing call and response with the chords, because you get like, it's like that kind of thing. So that just kind of sort of illustrates for you like how you should have things kind of playing off each other in the mix. With very minimal tracks like this and very sort of like simple deep grooves like this, the way you keep it interesting is with the interplay of the different elements. So if you have things kind of doing like call and response like that, it makes it a lot more interesting than just having the bass line go all the way through and the chord stab go all the way through. So for the sound on this one, I made it using operator. What we have here is actually just really simple. It's just a square wave going into a low pass filter. And the reason why I did this was because I wanted a sine wave. But you'll notice with a sine wave, when it goes up an octave, it'll be like way louder. It's like too quiet when it's playing the low note and too loud on the high notes. So by switching this to a square wave, and then just putting a low pass on there to dial it back to basically a sine wave, you can hear that has a lot more even sort of like volume between the notes. So that's kind of technique there. Definitely a good one for making deep subs like this. After that, I just have a drum bus. Here's without it. And then with it, you can hear it just fattens the bass up a little bit. And then the last thing we have on there is just a compressor side chaining it a little bit to the kick. So then I have the kick and the bass in a group together, sort of like a low end bus of sorts. I do this a lot in my videos. But, it just helps to tie the low end together more. The kick and the bass really are the low end in these kinds of tracks. I mean, if you listen. So it helps to put them in a group and kind of squash them together with some processing. So here is with nothing. And then with everything. So yeah, you can hear what that's doing there. So the first thing we have is a drum bus. Pretty simple. Just got the drive up bit, got the crunch up bit as well. Kind of fattening up the kick and the bass. This helps to squash them together a little bit. Like it kind of glues them together and fills in some space between them. And then after that, I just have this EQ8. And this is actually very similar to the one that was on the kick. This is just bringing up the low end a bit more, making it a bit fatter. This makes a big difference, like in your overall track, doing these kinds of things, like boosting the low end on your kick and your bass. And then I also have this cut here at 250, just to cut out some mud. And that is it for the low end bus. Next thing that we have here is these hi-hats, which sound like this. So what these are white noise hi-hats. I made these both using white noise. You can see we have one that's just doing 16th notes, and then one that's playing on the upbeats. So you can see the technique here is the same for both of them. It's just a little bit differently done, I guess. You can see we have some white noise with a short envelope on it going into a bandpass filter. So I'll show you here is before the bandpass. And the bandpass dials it back to more of a hi-hat sound. And then for the one on the upbeats, again, same thing. White noise, short envelope into the bandpass. Now, this is a good way to make hi-hats because what you can do is kind of make, like, sort of guarantee the dynamics between them, if that makes any sense. So, what I mean by this is when you have hi-hats and you have one that's playing constantly like this and one's on the upbeats, you kind of, if you notice, you want the one that's going to kind of be in the background a little bit, and then you want the one that's playing on the upbeats to be more up front. You can see if I switch these, like if I make the one on the upbeats darker, you can hear like it just doesn't feel right. So this is why it's nice being able to do it with just like with a bandpass, because you can basically set your own, set it exactly how you want it to be. Like, it's a lot easier than going and trying to find samples that fit together, I feel like. So those are the hi-hats. The next thing that we have here is this quote-unquote shaker, which sounds like this. So what I was trying to do here was I wanted something that kind of sounded like a shaker. Like, if you listen to this, it's got like that kind of mid-rangey, sort of crunchy texture to it. But I wanted to be able to program it a little bit more myself. Like with a shaker loop or something like that, you're kind of just stuck with the loops. So what I've got here is I have these 4 different percussion sounds. Just different percussions. And what I've done is I put them in a drum rack. You can see we've got them playing this pattern where it's just constantly going. And then I have those going through this EQ8, which is cutting out like a ton of low end. And it kind of sounds like a shaker, when you hear it in the groove. It just sounds like some kind of like that style of percussion. And then I also have an echo on there. Just doing dotted eighth notes. You can hear that kind of fills out the pattern a little bit. And yeah, the next thing that we have here is this percussion, which sounds like this. So this is meant to be kind of like the main percussion. We have like this shaker. But you can hear it's kind of missing something. So this is just kind of filling that out a little bit. So what we have here is we just have a few different sounds. You can see I've got like this drum break, this little chop from a drum break going, and then I've got this percussion, and then just 2 more sort of percussions like that, and then these are a little bit more sparse. The other one, the shaker, was just constant 16th notes. This is more like kind of coming in sparsely there. But yeah, and then I have a few effects on there. We just have a bit of saturation to kind of beef it up a bit, give it a bit more texture, and then we have an EQ8 cutting out the low end, and that is it for the percussion. And then the last layer we have here is the clap, which sounds like this. So you can hear this is just like a little sort of small, tight clap, pretty well suited for minimal house. And then I just have that going through a bit of drum bus to kind of beef it up. Now, something with this is you can see I have this track delay on, and I've actually got it at -8 milliseconds. So what this is doing is it's the same thing as if I just moved like that back slightly like that, like I do sometimes in my videos. But it's just a little bit easier to control this way because you can just change the dial. Like if I want to make this even more delayed like that, you can just do that. Or it's a little bit easier than having to sit there and like once you get a bunch of clips with this, having to go in and change the positioning of every note in every clip is just brutal. So doing it this way is a lot easier. But yeah, that gives it a bit of a more interesting feel with the kick. You can hear like when it hits right on top of the kick, you don't really hear the clap as much, and the clap feels kind of diminished by that. But when you put it a little bit before it, it makes all the difference there. So that is going to be it for this one. Thank you very much, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Once again, you can get the project file and samples and the MIDI and the presets and all of that stuff from this video in the description. And if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there because it's already available. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.